In parts 1 and 2, we explored why native ancestry stories became widespread throughout Appalachia and how the Appalachian frontier developed as a complex meeting place of many peoples. Now we turn to one of the most important and often misunderstood topics in genealogy. Historical records did not simply document identity. They often shaped identity. Government officials, census takers, courts, local communities, and political systems frequently assigned racial classifications that could change from one generation to the next. These changes continue to affect genealogical research today. To understand many Native American ancestry claims, we must first understand how race was recorded in historical records. Many researchers treat census records as absolute truth. In reality, census records were created by human beings. Enumerators often relied on visual observation. Sometimes they accepted information from neighbors. Sometimes they made assumptions. Sometimes they misunderstood families completely. The result is that census records frequently contain errors involving names, ages, occupations, birthplaces, and racial classifications. Genealogists must remember that the census is evidence, not unquestionable fact. One major challenge in genealogy is that racial categories were not consistent. The categories available on census forms changed repeatedly over time. Definitions also changed. A family might be classified one way in one decade and differently in the next. Government officials often followed changing laws, social expectations, and political pressures. These shifts created confusion that still affects researchers today. Perhaps no census category creates more confusion than the term mulatto. Many modern researchers assume it always referred to African and European ancestry. Historical reality was more complicated. Different states and different census takers often used the category inconsistently. Some officials applied it to people believed to have African ancestry. Others used it for mixed ancestry generally. Still others applied it to native families, mixed communities, or anyone who did not fit neatly into existing categories. Because of this inconsistency, the label alone rarely proves ancestry. The category free-colored was equally complex. This label included people from numerous backgrounds. Some descended from free African American communities. Some had mixed European ancestry. Some had indigenous ancestry. Some belonged to long-established frontier populations that had existed for generations. Researchers often make the mistake of assuming everyone classified as free-colored shared the same background. Historical records reveal a far more diverse reality. Many people assume native ancestors should simply appear as Indian in census records. Unfortunately, it rarely worked that way. Numerous indigenous families were classified under other categories. Some lived outside recognized tribal communities. Some had mixed ancestry. Some adopted different identities to avoid discrimination. Others were classified according to local customs rather than official definitions. As a result, native ancestry often becomes difficult to trace through census records alone. Throughout American history, some families gradually became classified as white. This process occurred for many reasons: migration, economic opportunity, marriage, community acceptance, changing laws, political pressure. A family labeled mulatto or free-colored in one generation might appear as white in the next. Over time, earlier identities could disappear from the documentary record. Many indigenous communities experienced enormous disruption. Some tribes lost federal recognition. Others merged with neighboring groups. Some were removed from traditional territories. Many families became absorbed into surrounding populations. As communities fragmented, official records often stopped identifying descendants as native. The loss of community recognition frequently contributed to the loss of documentary identity. One of the most surprising discoveries for genealogists is how often records disagree. An ancestor might appear as white in one document, mulatto in another, free-colored in a third, Indian in a local record. These contradictions frustrate researchers but also reveal how fluid racial classifications could be. This is why no single record should be used to determine ancestry. The entire documentary trail must be examined. When official records changed identities, family stories often became the only surviving link to the past. Grandparents remembered things that government records failed to preserve. Communities passed down knowledge through oral tradition. Some stories became distorted. Others preserved important truths. This is one reason why oral history remains a valuable genealogical source. Not because it proves ancestry, but because it often points researchers toward questions worth investigating. Modern DNA testing has added another layer to this discussion. DNA sometimes supports family traditions, sometimes it challenges them, sometimes it reveals ancestry that records never documented. However, DNA should never be interpreted in isolation. The strongest conclusions come from combining records, genetics, historical context, and family history. No single piece of evidence tells the entire story. The history of racial classification in America is complicated. Researchers should resist the temptation to jump to conclusions. A census category does not automatically prove ancestry. Neither does a family story, neither does a DNA estimate. Responsible genealogy requires examining multiple sources and understanding the historical environment in which those records were created. Context is everything. In Part 4, we will move into one of the most controversial areas of genealogy, DNA testing. We will examine what DNA can tell us about native ancestry and what it cannot. We'll discuss ethnicity estimates, inherited segments, disappearing DNA, genetic inheritance, and why family stories and DNA results sometimes appear to conflict. The answers are often far more complicated than many people expect. Historical records are among the most valuable tools available to genealogists, but records are not perfect. They reflect the people, governments, and societies that created them. The changing census categories of American history remind us that identity is often more complicated than a single word written on a form. Understanding these classifications helps us better understand our ancestors and the stories they left behind. The goal is not to fit people into categories. The goal is to understand their lives. Thank you for joining me for Part 3 of the hidden history of Native American ancestry claims in Appalachia. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, subscribe, share, and follow. Join us for Part 4, where we'll explore one of the most debated topics in modern genealogy, DNA evidence versus family stories.